Blog Talk Radio.
Are you ready to take a bite out of the competition? Are you looking for ideas to make your business better? Welcome to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet,
sponsored by Apple Capital Group.
At the core of every successful business, you'll find people making a difference. And with each episode of the Core Business Show, we talk with those people, examine those ideas, and explore the strategies that make them special. Now, the host of the Core Business Show, Tim Jacquet.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Core Business Show. I'm Tim Jacquet, your host. Today, I have an interview with comedian Jim Melis. We're going to actually have a conversation over the next 15 minutes to talk about his career as a comic and how he actually marketed himself and managed himself and how he comes up with his comic routines. If you'd like to join in the conversation, please feel free to call in at 347-324-3460, or you can pose a question in the chat room, or you can go ahead and email us at info@thecorebusinessshow.com. Well, Jim, welcome to the show.
Hi. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming on. I guess to begin with, our listening artists always love personal stories from our guests. So if you don't mind, kind of tell us about yourself and how you got started.
Well, I used to be a banker, a controller at a few different banks. I was a CFO for about 20 years. For the last, I was at different banks. I'm trying to remember them off the top of my head. General Bank, Deutsche Bank, Bank of America. Then, when the economy wasn't doing so well, I moved to a hospital, and recently I was a CFO at a college here in New York City for roughly about 7 years or so. And about a year ago, my wife was about 6 months pregnant, and we talked about it, and we decided, hey, I want to be at home. I want to watch my son grow. I want to be part of his life all the time. So I decided to do it as a consulting basis. So I made sure I left the school in good standing, the whole thing. So I still help out on a consulting basis, different companies that are struggling or in debt or whatever. But my passion is comedy, and it's a weird way how I got into it. So I've been a banker, a finance guy, always the suit and tie, the whole thing. And one day I was at a party, and some guy that was in comedy said, "You have a strange way of telling a story. Even when you're not trying to be funny, it's funny." So I'm like, "I guess, thank you, I guess." And he said, why don't you write some stuff down, and I'll get you some time on stage." So I wrote some stuff down. Again, this was about maybe 12, 13 years ago, somewhere around then. And I wound up doing my first show ever at the Comic Strip Live here in New York. And that's a fancy, it's a great place. All the comedy clubs, a lot of them don't look fancy when you see them. The bathrooms smell real bad, the whole thing. But this is where David Letterman and all those guys go to get top talent for their shows. That's where Chris Rock and Seinfeld and all those guys, Adam Sandler, all those guys were discovered and everything. So it was pretty exciting. I was there. I actually puked twice before I went up, and now it's almost like a ritual, even before this phone call. Anytime it's a public speaking type of thing, I kind of puke twice right before I go up, and something about being in front of crowds. But it also helped me so I was doing it more of as a hobby at the beginning because I was a banker and all that, but it also helped me give better presentations as a banker. I wouldn't be afraid to tell stories of how the numbers make sense. When you explain numbers to non-business people, it doesn't, they get this glazed over look in their eye, and some of them fall asleep in the chair. So I kind of make stories out of everything so people understand it, present it very nicely for them. So that's how I got into it, into comedy. And now that I have more time and that I have a lot more stuff to write about because I have a brand new son, it's doing it a lot more and traveling all over the country and things like that, doing it. So it's a lot of fun.
Wow. Is there art when it's to Carmen, be a comedian, or it's just pure talent?
Well, it is a little. They are very talented guys out there that are very good, but a harder thing is you got to be persistent. I mean, there's tons of guys that are talented that I see never making it anywhere. But the biggest thing is you got to be persistent. There's a lot of us out there, a lot of comedians out there. In fact, Manhattan and LA are saturated with them. I'm in Manhattan here, to make it, to actually get to the next level, you need to just keep going, keep doing it. Don't worry about it if you see another guy that's not as good as you making it. There's enough out there, enough work out there for everybody. You just got to keep being persistent and everything.
Wow. So when you actually sit and write your materials, how your material come to you? It just comes in the middle of the night or during the day, or is it a thought? Well, how do you come with your material?
Well, there's many ways but yeah, the stuff that comes up in the middle of the night is usually very good. I always try to keep a recording or something that records, like my cell phone, something that records close by, because I used to keep a notepad next to the bed or something, but when you do that, you're like, what does this mean the next day? I wrote pink chairs and spaghetti, but I have no clue what that means the next day. So now I keep a recording while I actually say the joke, so this way I know the next day when I wake up what I was talking about. All that. But that's one way. But the bigger thing, the one most comedians do, is you got to write. You got to keep writing. You got to sit in front of your computer or notepad or whatever it is, plant your butt in the chair and just write. And every day, at least spend some time a day, like an hour a day, a half hour, whatever you got to do, however you do it, whatever your best way is. Get comfortable, find the best part of your apartment or whatever, wherever you like to write, and just do it. And again, 90% of the stuff is going to be crap. But the whole thing about writing is you rewrite it. I might write 20 pages and only use 3 lines from it. But the thing is, you're building that muscle. It's like going to the gym and doing push-ups to get your arms strong, and this is building that muscle that writes. And eventually, these things will come a lot easier to you. At the beginning, it's tough because you're going to be sitting in front of a computer and just staring at it. But then you just write. You just keep writing about anything, and eventually it'll come to you. But I'll be everywhere. I'll be at a restaurant. I'll be at my family's house. That's where I get tons of the information. Anytime I can't think of something, I go visit my parents and all that stuff. So, I make fun of my wife and my son. It's very, very interesting and all that stuff where I get it. But the biggest thing is I do make a lot of notes. Like I have this little memo thing on my phone where I make tons of notes and all that stuff. So if an idea comes to me, I could expand on it when I write it home later that day or later the next day, that kind of thing. So it's very good. But most comics you'd find do this.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We're going to be back in a moment, and we're going to talk about, I guess, the people who influence you and people you watched in the past as you growing your profession. We'll be back in a moment with the Core Business Show. I'm Tim JK, host, talking to Jim Melis. We'll be back in a moment.
You're listening to the Core Business Show, sponsored by Apple Capital Group. Apple Capital Group in Jacksonville, Florida, is a commercial lender that specializes in asset-based loans, equipment leasing and financing, invoice financing, commercial real estate loans, and asset-based financing in the U.S. and Canada. Apple Capital Group is a direct lender that lends on their private equity investment portfolio. 90% of most loans are decided within 2 hours, and vendor funding within 24 hours after documents are completed, with a one-page application. No slow no's, just a quick decision and a fast yes. To get more information about lending from Apple Capital Group, call 866-611-7457. That's 866-611-7457 to speak with one of our loan specialists. Or visit us right now at applecapitalgroup.com. Welcome back to the core. Once again, here's Tim Jacquet.
And we're back with Jim Melis Comedian. Jim, there was a movie in the late 80s called Punchline, I think, with Tom Hanks. And it talked about I'm not sure it was based on the comedy house you mentioned earlier, but is that the way things are as a comedian? Your struggles, you're practicing with an audience to try to get a punchline?
Yeah. The movie, I remember it vaguely because it was so
with
long
Tom
ago.
Hanks and Sally Fields?
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago, but I remember it, and it kind of got my juices flowing way back then when I was a kid. But yeah, there's also another movie out there that Seinfeld put out called Comedian, and that one is also pretty accurate. That's basically it's Seinfeld's life after the TV show and how he wanted to break into being a comedian again and how hard it is. And it was him and a younger comedian and their parallels and their struggles. Like, here's a guy that's been there, made it, and another guy that's trying to make it. And it kind of gives you an idea. But yeah, it's very tough. Like, you might write something, you think it's funny, you try it out on your wife or your family, and they think it's funny, but then you go on stage and nothing happens, or they laugh at a different line there. So you need to. The biggest thing they tell comics is you need stage time. That's the most important thing. Stage time. So you do it everywhere. And you kind of perfect your stuff. You kind of change things, tweak things constantly. You're constantly tweaking things there. So that's. But yes, it's very. You're in front of. I think your question was, is it like that? Do you have to keep doing it in front of the audience and all that? That's the only way. It's kind of like a love affair with the audience. You got to keep it going and all that.
And I remember his movie, The Comedian. Is there a scary thing? I know you can go to your family, and your family's going to laugh at everything you say, and your friends are going to go with you, but your audience is going to be really honest with you. If you're going to be funny or you're not going to be funny, how can you make that connection with your audience? There's something that worked with one audience is not working with this one. Because you're on stage, the lights are gleaming, you can barely see your audience, and you have all these people here who's going to either laugh or just going to not give you any inspiration, and they're going to sap all your energy out of you. How can you keep your mind focused to reach them when you can barely see them in the lights?
Well, the first thing, remember I told you when I first started, when I first get up there, my heart's pounding, and I get up there, and kind of like when you're going up that roller coaster, you're starting to get nervous, and then when you go over the hump and go down, you're saying hooray and all that stuff. So after I get my first laugh, then I kind of relax a little bit. Or even when I grab the mic and just look at the lights, I kind of relax a little bit. I don't even need the first laugh. Just getting up there, I'm like, okay, it's done. I'm here. So let me go with it, all that stuff. So, but again, I tell stories. I don't usually tell one-liners or anything like that. I tell stories. So basically everyone, usually 99% of the time, usually people relate to the stories because they're about my family, my wife. And no matter what your race or your religion is or what type of family you have, you're going to relate to this one way or another because this is stuff that happens to everybody. So maybe your parents aren't like mine. Mine are, yours might have been loving and sweet and nice. Mine weren't so sweet and happy and nice. I mean, my dad would give me advice all the time, like, Jim, everything happens for a reason, but sometimes the reason is you're stupid and you make bad decisions. Stuff like that was what my dad would say. And my mom was just as bad. But I come from a Greek family, and even though they were rough around the edges, everyone gets one. Either has been there, has that, or knows somebody that's been there. So it's, again, like a love affair with the audience. Like the minute they get your story, they laugh where they're supposed to, they're getting you. They click. And I've also done shows at the beginning where to get my skin thicker, I've tried to do shows where people normally aren't listening. Like, I'll even ask promoters, can you put me on during the check spot or at the beginning when nobody's listening? The check spot is when they're paying their bill, but no one's paying attention. And I go in there very quiet. I'm not screaming or anything. I'm mellow when I walk on the stage, suit and tie. In fact, I have my coffee because I've been up really early, either taking care of the baby or whatever. So it's nighttime. I'm with a big cup of coffee, and I go in there very quietly. And like a minute or two into it, I got them leaning in at the edge of their seat, wanting to hear what the next part of the story is. So it's exciting stuff for me.
Wow.
The worst day on stage, the worst day ever, is still better to me than the best day when I was in the finance world. All that, believe it or not.
Wow, that's amazing. People are generally funny. If you just sit there and watch them, any course of the day, things are just, you can get your materials all around you. There's some comics that work on people, some comics work on things. Which one is the most effective? Is telling stories of people or doing one-liners? Because you only can do so many one-liners. But is it all about the story and how you deliver that story?
Well, it's different. I mean, like, there's observational humor like Seinfeld, where he took apart. I call like a wordsmith. He picks apart something to the very finest detail of it and explores it all different ways. So there's comics like that. There's comics who go on stage with a hammer and they crush a watermelon, things like that. And then there's the ones that tell stories. And again, I kind of gravitate towards George Carlin did a little of both. He told stories, but it was observational humor too. And I think it's all the way it works. I mean, Rodney Dangerfield was the one-liner guy. I mean, nobody can match him on how many laughs per minute he would get. I think the norm is like 3 or 4 laughs a minute, something like that. And if you're doing that, you're one of the top comics around. Rodney Dangerfield was around 7 or 8 laughs a minute, double that, because he just did the quick one-liners and never stopped, that kind of thing. So it all depends, like what type of thing you are. But for me, I like to get them to know about me, to know what my life's like, what it's really. And I think, to me, I like the comics that go in there. And there are comics that might do nasty humor, that just make fun of people, and those guys do very well too. But I kind of like the ones that go in deep and tell you a little bit about themselves. That's a little bit different than the regular guy that does a one-liner or something like that.
Wow.
And I think a lot of comics are doing that. In fact, you need to, this day and age. There's so many comics out there. You need to break out. You need to be different. And that's why I kind of go and do stuff that not everyone does. Like, I go up there and I talk about how great my life is with my wife. And most comics go the other route. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I talk about how that we do have misunderstandings, things like that, but most comics would probably just totally make fun of their wife. I do that too, but in a different way. It's obvious that I'm nuts about her, all that stuff. It's also obvious that I'm not nuts about my ex-wife and all that stuff. So I make fun of everybody. If you come near me, I mean, I might even have you on the next show, talk about you the next time, all that stuff.
Wow. How is that when you actually interact with telling people that you personally know and they hear it? I'm sure they're going to be shocked the very first time, but how can you smooth that over and say, hey, you're my best friend, but I'm going to talk about you?
Oh, they love it. I mean, my parents love it. And again, I don't talk about my parents like in the best light, but they love it. They're proud. They're actually not embarrassed at all. In fact, my dad was like, I want royalties. I'm the guy that calls you an idiot and made you funny. You're always talking about me. And my mom, like, I think their attention span is a little short though, because I don't think they get in deep, because I make fun of them constantly and all that. I mean, if you see some of my videos, you'll see. I mean, it's either my nephew or my son or my wife or my parents or my friends. I mean, everybody's fair game. But again, my stuff isn't nasty. It's not mean, so I mean, they don't put them in the best light, but I also make fun of myself too. So it's not nasty, but they get it. It's relatable and it's true too. That's the funny part.
Let's talk about legends. This past decade have produced really some phenomenal legends. I mean, we're talking about just even recently, Phyllis Diller. You have Bob Hope. I mean, you just can go endless of comics that we have reels of and videos from the past century. Any of those legends, the real old legends, really stood out that say, as a child, you say, well, oh, I really like that. They're so funny. I think of Mom and Pa Kettle, and they're just regular old people, but they were really funny the way they did things with all their children. But is it some of them that speaks to you? Is the Bob Hope or Lucille Ball or Bill Cosby? Any of those legends back the turn of the 50s and 60s, 70s that was really funny that spoke to you?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of heroes like that. I mean, I love Bill Cosby, the way he tells a story. And again, not to say that I'm as good as him, but my humor is like his. Like, if you read his humor, like if someone wrote down what he said on stage, half of that you would say it isn't funny, but it's the way he says it, the way he performs it that does it. Like, no other comic can do what Bill Cosby does. Like, you just try it out. Read what he says, and you'll say it's not really funny. But when you see him on stage, you fall off your chair. So I kind of like his style, and that's sort of how my style is. Like, if you just read some of my jokes, you'd be like, what? It's not the most hilarious thing, but when I say it, I mean, I have people falling off their seats and all that stuff there. I mean, and again, it's very, so I kind of try to mimic him, but I love Eddie Murphy, who was very the opposite of me. He was very dirty, very lively, very in your face. And I love Richard Pryor, and the same thing. He dug in deep. George Carlin was another one I liked a lot because he was brilliant, and he cut things down to their tiniest detail, but he was also a storyteller as well. So I kind of like him too. And again, the newer guys, Chris Rock and Seinfeld, they kind of developed everything all those other guys were doing, and they just took it to the next level too. So those are the people that I looked up to, but there's tons more. There's tons more, but those were the biggies. Again, guys like Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers, they kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of comics today too. So you can go back, and the same thing, Bob Hope as well. I mean, so if you kind of go by generation, you'll see the older ones started out, and then the ones after them developed it more, and the ones after them developed the style even more. So I kind of have a bunch of heroes there. But I remember I used to memorize all the Bill Cosby and George Carlin records that I had and that kind of thing when I was young.
Wow. So some people I remember the story on Phyllis Diller just recently, and she came up in the 60s, actually in the middle of her near middle age, and she started her career, and it bloomed from there. Just an amazing story from a housewife, and from the 60s, she started her career, and it just blossomed from there, and she had her own unique style. Is it something about telling a story that you need to always be mindful of? As she delivers, and Bill Cosby delivers, George Carlin delivers, is there something about that delivery? If you are coming up as a comedian, you need to be focused on this. Regardless, it's still about the story. This is how you should tell the story. How should you tell a person to tell a story?
Well, you first write it down the way you see it and all that, and then you go in and say, does the way I'm telling it capture the essence? Does it capture the funny? Am I using, this isn't a book, so when you're on the stage, people have short attention spans. There's things going on. There's waitresses walking by, there's lights, there's music. Sometimes you might even be any useless words. That's why it's a lot of rewriting too. You might write something and then rewrite it about 50 times before you get it right. But you need to cut out all the extra stuff. It's not the same as writing a book. You can't make it all. So you got to describe the scene, describe how the people are talking and looking at each other, describe what they felt, how they looked, what they were wearing, but very concisely. It's actually, you're editing constantly. You might have to take the word of out, the word the out. You have to use less adjectives, use better words. You can't, you got to be, that's the hardest part. You got to always be looking at the time, because you're going to lose their attention if you're sitting there telling a long-winded story. And you got to have jokes in it. You can't just tell a story and expect people to get the funny parts on their own. You got to paint the picture beautifully with it and get to the funny quickly. It can't just be it can't just be like something where I'm going to tell them, I'll wing it. I'll just tell them about my wife or something like that. It's got to be, you got to have a point, a setup, a middle, an end. And there's a way to it. A little bit is talent. Some people can do it off the cuff. I mean, I think there was some guys, I think Howie Mandel was one of them. He would just point to someone in the audience and say, what do you do? And just start talking to them and go off like that. I mean, I can go off on tangents as well. If something's happening in the room, I can go off that way too. But you got to be able to get to the funny quickly, all that stuff, and describe it all well. So that's why people gravitate. A lot of comics gravitate to the one-liners, because you're getting to the funny right away. But I think it's a little bit more talent to get into the story. Tell them a little bit about you, describe something in detail, be a little different. Because anyone could tell a one-liner, and get the same amount of laughs as somebody else. But telling a story, that's an art. That's an art to it, and it takes a lot of work. And you do need talent, but it takes a lot of work, too, to keep doing it consistently.
Wow. Any story you'd like to leave us with? Either one of your stories you want to share with us, and when you close that, kind of tell us where we can find your information, your website, and if they need to reach out to you.
Okay. Well, I mean, let's see. The story I'd like to leave you with. Basically, I guess, again, I started in the finance world, and I started out late in the comedy world. Like most of these guys, started in their teens. 13 years old or 14, doing comedy constantly in the clubs. And now they're big. I started only 12 years ago, so I was a little bit past it, but it's exciting. And I'm doing what I love, and I've never been happier. So it's a great thing. And I wanted to say, so I even set up a charity, too. Because of the finance part of me, I wanted to help charities, because we have a son. Our son, Grayson, that just popped out. We had him in our 40s. Many people told us it'd be hard to have a healthy baby in your 40s, and they were all like, why are you being so selfish? Parents, friends, people even in the medical community all were saying, you know what, the chances are having a healthy baby. But needless to say, we did it anyway. We had a great, happy, healthy kid. He's always laughing. He's always having a great time. I mean, I chased him around. Yesterday, he was licking the Clorox and the Lysol bottles. And I don't know what it is with babies. They're always trying to kill themselves. Like, he's reaching for the knives. I mean, and he's happy, too. I don't know, but anything he touches goes in his mouth. But anyway, because of him, he inspired me also to put a charity together. And I don't know, I think you're from the business world. You might know that it takes a long time. It took us a year to get this 501c3 set up, which means anyone who donates gets tax deduction. It's a tax deductible donation. So it took a long time to set that up, because the mission of the charity can't be to give money to Jim. It has to be something real, something serious. So the charity, it's called Making a Difference, One Laugh at a Time. And the website, we wanted to make it short. We didn't want to make that whole thing the website, but it's givingbachisgood.org is the website. And we do shows and with fancy comedians and me, and we kind of give all the profits to the charity. The last one was for kids in distress situations, and they basically give food and clothing and things like that to kids that need it. And we're doing another show this October 23rd at Gotham in New York, which is the one where you see on TV, The Last Comic Standing, the one in New York. So it's a nice place. Everybody loves it, and all the money goes to the charity and everything. So I kind of intertwine the finance stuff and the comedy stuff together to help charities out, get their fundraising going, all that stuff. So, and I guess that's the story I'd leave you with, unless you want me to make fun of somebody or something like that.
Well, Jim, I really appreciate you coming on the program. And that website, your website and your charity website again is?
Oh, my website is easy, and you can also find the charity there too. It's jimmelis.com. So JIMELIS.com. And the charity website is givingbackisgood.org, because it's a not-for-profit there.
Great.
And again, the next show for the charity is October 23rd, like a week before Halloween, if anyone's in New York City. It's a great show and a lot of fun, and even the food is good at this comedy club.
Wow. Well, thank you for giving your time to us this morning. We spent more than 30 minutes, but thank you for spending this time with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Okay.
Thank you.
Take
care. Same here.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Again, this has been a production of The Core Business Show. This is Tim Jacquet, your host. You can download this episode on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, or you can go to the website, The Core Business Show, and download it there. Everybody, thank you for listening. Have a great day, and take care. I'm Tim Jacquet, your host.
Thank you for listening to The Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet. For a free quote on equipment leasing and financing, visit our website, applecapitalgroup.com. That's applecapitalgroup.com. And fill out the information to receive your free quote. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. And remember, you can always get to the core via iTunes. You'll find all our previous episodes there. Thanks again for listening to The Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet.